Have you ever taken something for granted, only to realize its true value when it was slipping through your fingers? This is the story of a man who had everything, including the perfect wife, but could not see what was right in front of him, until another man opened his eyes. The divorce papers sat on Jae-won Kang's mahogany desk like a silent accusation. He had been staring at them for 20 minutes, his Mont Blanc pen hovering over the signature line. 3 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of legal documents bearing the cold stamps of lawyers and notaries. 3 years of coming home to a woman who greeted him with warm meals and warmer smiles, a woman he had never truly appreciated. 3 years of treating his wife like a piece of furniture, functional and forgettable. At 34, Jae-won was the CEO of Kang Industries, one of the largest technology conglomerates in South Korea. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His name was whispered with reverence in boardrooms across Seoul. He had built an empire through sheer determination and ruthless ambition, sacrificing everything on the altar of success, including, it seemed, his marriage. The office around him reflected his status. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Uedo's financial district, where skyscrapers competed for dominance against the gray November sky. His desk was a monument to power, imported Italian wood polished to a mirror shine. Awards and accolades lined the walls, trophies of conquest in the business world that now seemed hollow in the face of his personal failure. Hana had been patient, more patient than any woman had a right to be. She had waited for him through countless late nights at the office, falling asleep alone in their king-sized bed, waking to find his side cold and untouched. She had smiled through holidays spent alone while he chased deals in foreign countries, celebrating Christmas with nothing but a text message and a promise to make it up to her that he never kept. She had defended him to her family, who questioned why she stayed with a man who treated her like a ghost. But even patience has its limits, and Hana had finally reached hers. Last month, she had finally asked for what he had been too cowardly to offer: a divorce. And Jae-won, in his characteristic coldness, had agreed without hesitation. Why fight for something he had never valued? Why pretend to care about a marriage that had been nothing more than a business arrangement from the start? Their union had been orchestrated by their families, two powerful clans seeking to merge their influence through matrimony. The Parks were old money, their fortune built on real estate and traditional industries. The Kangs were new money, their wealth accumulated through technology and aggressive expansion. The marriage was supposed to bridge those worlds, creating an alliance that would benefit both families for generations to come. Jae-won had agreed because it was expected, because Hana was suitable on paper, because saying no would have created complications he did not want to deal with. She was beautiful, educated, and came from the right background. She would make an acceptable wife, a competent hostess, a suitable mother for his eventual heirs. He had never stopped to consider whether he might actually fall in love with her. The thought had seemed absurd. Love was for people who had time for such frivolities. Jae-won Kang did not have time, so why was his hand trembling as he prepared to sign? He set down the pen and walked to the window of his corner office. The Han River stretched below, its waters reflecting the gray November sky. Boats moved slowly along its surface, carrying tourists who pointed at the glittering towers of Seoul's financial heart. Somewhere across that river, in the house they had shared for 3 years, Hana was probably packing her things, preparing to start a new life without him. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought something uncomfortably close to panic. He remembered the first time he had seen her, at the formal meeting arranged by their parents. She had worn a soft pink dress that made her look younger than her 26 years, and she had smiled at him with a warmth that had taken him off guard. He had expected someone calculating, someone who would view this marriage with the same cold pragmatism that he did. Instead, he had found a woman who seemed genuinely hopeful that they might build something real together. He had crushed that hope systematically over 3 years, without ever meaning to, without ever noticing what he was doing until it was too late. Director Choi's voice crackled through the intercom, jarring him from his thoughts. "Sir, your 4 o'clock is here. The representatives from the Shanghai group. Send them in." Jae-won straightened his tie and pushed all thoughts of divorce from his mind. He was a businessman first. Everything else could wait. The meeting stretched for 3 hours, a grueling negotiation over market access and profit margins. Jae-won performed his role flawlessly, his mind sharp and focused despite the turmoil beneath the surface. This was what he was good at. This was where he felt in control. Numbers and contracts and strategic positioning, these were problems he knew how to solve. But that night, when he returned to their home in Hanamdong, he found Hana in the living room surrounded by cardboard boxes. She was wrapping picture frames in newspaper, her movements efficient and practiced. She did not look up when he entered. "You are packing already?" It was not a question. "The apartment I found is available next week." Hana's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I thought I would get a head start." Jae-won stood in the doorway, feeling strangely like an intruder in his own home. The living room looked different somehow, emptier, even though she had only packed a few boxes. He realized with a start that most of the warmth in this house had come from her. The fresh flowers on the coffee table, peonies in spring, sunflowers in summer, chrysanthemums in fall. The soft throws draped over the leather couches, adding color to the monochrome palette he had chosen. The framed photographs on the walls, capturing moments he barely remembered living. The scent of home-cooked food that usually greeted him, kimchi jjigae simmering on the stove, fresh rice in the cooker. All of it was Hana, and all of it was disappearing into cardboard boxes. Where is this apartment? He did not know why he was asking. It should not matter to him where she went or what she did. They were getting divorced. Her life was no longer his concern. Hongdae. Hana finally looked up, and he was struck by how peaceful she seemed. There was no anger in her eyes, no resentment, just a quiet acceptance that somehow felt worse than fury. "It is small, but it is close to my new job." "New job? I start at a design firm next month." Hana smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the girl he had married, bright and hopeful and full of dreams. "I finally have time to pursue what I actually want to do." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and accusatory. For 3 years, she had put her dreams on hold to be his wife, to maintain his household, manage his social calendar, attend his events, play the role of the perfect corporate spouse. She had given up her own aspirations to support his, and he had never once asked what those aspirations might be. He had never once thought to wonder what she had sacrificed to stand beside him. That is good. The words felt hollow in his mouth. "I am glad you are moving forward." Hana studied him for a long moment, her head tilted slightly. "You know, Jae-won, in 3 years of marriage, that might be the kindest thing you have ever said to me." She returned to her packing, and Jae-won retreated to his study. He poured himself a whiskey from the crystal decanter on his desk and stared at the wall, trying to understand the strange heaviness in his chest. He should be relieved. This divorce was the right decision. They had never been compatible. He had never loved her. Had he? The question haunted him as he sat alone in the dark, the whiskey burning its way down his throat. He thought about all the nights he had worked late while she waited at home. He thought about all the dinners she had prepared that he had let go cold. He thought about all the times she had tried to reach him, to connect with him, and he had brushed her off with excuses about deadlines and meetings. He thought about the way she had looked at him on their wedding day, her eyes full of hope and nervous excitement. He thought about the way that hope had gradually faded over the years, replaced by resignation, and finally by this terrible, peaceful acceptance. He had done that to her. He had taken a vibrant, hopeful woman and slowly, methodically, worn her down until she had nothing left to give. The realization should have been devastating. Instead, Jae-won felt numb. He finished his whiskey, poured another, and told himself that it was better this way. She deserved someone who could give her what she needed. Someone who was not him. The following week passed in a blur of meetings and mergers. Jae-won threw himself into work with even more intensity than usual, staying at the office until midnight, filling every moment with productivity so he would not have to think about the woman who was systematically erasing herself from his life. He signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday afternoon, his signature neat and decisive. Hana had already signed her portion and sent them back through her lawyer. They had not seen each other since the night he found her packing. How fitting, he thought bitterly, that even their divorce was conducted with the efficiency of a business transaction. The house felt different after she left. Quieter. Colder. The housekeeper came every day to clean and cook, but her meals tasted like cardboard compared to Hana's cooking. The flowers wilted and were not replaced. The soft throws disappeared, revealing the stark leather beneath. The photographs came down, leaving blank spaces on the walls that seemed to mock him. Jae-won told himself he did not notice. He told himself he did not care. He filled the empty spaces with work, with networking events, with anything that would keep him from spending time in the house that no longer felt like home. He accepted every invitation, attended every gala, shook hands with every potential partner and investor. He smiled for photographs and made small talk with people he would forget by morning. And he told himself he was fine. A month after the divorce was finalized, Jae-won attended a charity gala at the Shilla Hotel. It was the kind of event he typically despised, full of shallow socialites and businessmen pretending to care about causes they would forget by morning. But attendance was expected, and Jae-won-kang always met expectations. The ballroom was a glittering sea of designer gowns and expensive suits. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across the dance floor. A string quartet played softly in the corner, barely audible over the murmur of conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. Jae-won moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on his latest acquisition, deflecting questions about his personal life with practiced ease. He was nursing his second glass of champagne when he saw her. Hana stood across the ballroom, wearing a deep blue gown that hugged her figure in ways he had never noticed when she was his wife. The silk draped elegantly over her shoulders, cinching at her waist before flowing to the floor in a cascade of midnight color. Her hair was different, shorter, and styled in soft waves that framed her face. She was laughing at something, her head thrown back, her eyes sparkling with genuine joy, and standing beside her, his hand resting familiarly on the small of her back, was a man Jae-won did not recognize. He was tall, almost as tall as Jae-won, with an easy smile and the kind of relaxed confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. His suit was well cut, but not ostentatious, his hair artfully tousled in a way that suggested creativity rather than carelessness. He leaned close to whisper something in Hana's ear, and she blushed, actually blushed, swatting his arm playfully. Something hot and ugly twisted in Jae-won's stomach. Who is that? He grabbed the arm of a passing acquaintance, a society columnist named Mrs. Yoon who knew everyone worth knowing in Seoul. The woman followed his gaze and smiled knowingly. Oh, that is Seo Junho. He is a photographer, very successful. Does a lot of work for fashion magazines, Vogue Korea, Harper's Bazaar, that sort of thing. Very artistic, very passionate about his work. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. He and your ex-wife have been seeing each other for a few weeks now. They met when she started at the design firm. He was doing a photo shoot there, and apparently it was love at first sight. They make quite the handsome couple, do they not? Jae-won released her arm without responding. His eyes were fixed on Hana and this Junho person, watching as the photographer guided her onto the dance floor. Junho's hand slid from her back to her waist, pulling her closer than strictly necessary for a waltz. Hana did not seem to mind. In fact, she seemed to be enjoying herself immensely. This was what she had looked like when they were dating, Jae-won realized with a shock. before he had suffocated her spirit with his coldness and neglect. She had been vibrant like this, full of life and laughter. At their engagement party, she had danced with her father with the same radiant joy. On their honeymoon in Paris, she had looked at him with this same hopeful light in her eyes. He had been so focused on his work that he had not noticed when that light began to dim. He had not noticed when she stopped laughing, stopped smiling, stopped trying to reach him. He had not noticed when she stopped being Hana and became simply his wife, a title without meaning, a role without substance. Now another man was making her laugh. Another man was holding her close. Another man was receiving all the warmth and affection that Jae-won had been too blind to appreciate. He watched as Jun-ho twirled her across the dance floor, her blue dress flowing like water. He watched as she smiled up at the photographer with an expression he had never seen directed at himself. He watched as Jun-ho pressed his lips to her forehead in a gesture of casual intimacy that spoke of genuine affection. And something inside Jae-won cracked. He left the gala without saying goodbye to anyone, pushing through the crowd of well-wishers and acquaintances, ignoring the concerned calls that followed him. He found his driver waiting outside and barked an address that was not his own. 20 minutes later, he was standing outside Hana's apartment building in Hongdae, staring up at the lights in her window. What was he doing here? What did he hope to accomplish? She was on a date with another man. She had moved on with her life. She was happy. He should be happy for her. He should go home and pour himself a whiskey and congratulate himself on a clean divorce. This was what he had wanted, was it not? Freedom, independence, the ability to focus on his work without the distraction of a wife who needed attention he was not willing to give. But standing in the cold November night, watching the warm light of her apartment, all he felt was an overwhelming sense of loss. That night, Jae-won could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Hana in that blue dress, saw Jun-ho's hand on her waist, saw the happiness on her face that he had never been able to give her. He told himself it did not matter. They were divorced. She had every right to move on. He should be happy that she was happy, but happiness was the last thing he felt. He got out of bed at 3 a.m. and poured himself a whiskey, then another, then a third. By the time the sun rose over Seoul, he was still sitting in his study, the empty bottle on his desk, his mind spinning with regret, and something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. The days that followed were torture. Jae-won found himself obsessively searching for information about Seo Jun-ho. The man was 31, 3 years younger than Jae-won. He had studied photography in New York and Paris before returning to Seoul to open his own studio in Hapjeong. His work was featured in every major fashion magazine in Korea, and several international publications as well. He had won awards for his artistic vision and his ability to capture the essence of his subjects. He was successful, talented, and by all accounts, a genuinely good person. He volunteered at an arts program for underprivileged youth. He donated a portion of his profits to environmental causes. He had a golden retriever named Biscuit that he posted about constantly on social media, and the comments were full of people praising him for being kind and approachable and down to earth. Jae-won hated him instantly. He started finding excuses to be in Hongdae. Business meetings that could have been conducted by video call. Site visits to properties he had no intention of purchasing. Random errands that took him past Hana's apartment building. He told himself he was just checking on her, making sure she was safe. He was simply concerned for his ex-wife's well-being. It was perfectly normal. It was absolutely not normal. One evening, as he sat in his car across the street from her building like a complete lunatic, he saw them. Hana and Jun-ho, walking hand in hand, returning from what looked like a date. Jun-ho was carrying a bouquet of flowers, white roses, Hana's favorite. Jae-won knew they were her favorite because she had mentioned it once, early in their marriage, commenting on how beautiful the roses in a shop window were. And he had never bought her flowers. Not once in 3 years. Jun-ho said something that made Hana laugh, her whole face lighting up with the force of her amusement. Then he leaned down and kissed her, right there on the sidewalk, gentle and sweet. Hana's arms wrapped around his neck, and she kissed him back with an enthusiasm that made Jaewon's blood boil. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. This was insane. He had no right to be angry. He had given her up willingly, eagerly even. He had signed those divorce papers without a second thought. And now he was sitting in his car like a jealous teenager, watching his ex-wife kiss another man and feeling like his chest was being crushed. For the first time in his adult life, Jae-won Kyung was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. He had made a terrible mistake. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had taken Hana for granted from the very beginning. He had seen her as an obligation, a box to check on his path to success, rather than as a person worthy of love and attention. He had spent 3 years sleeping beside her without ever truly seeing her. And now that she was gone, now that she was in the arms of another man, he finally understood what he had lost. He loved her. He had always loved her. He had just been too stupid and too scared to admit it. But what could he do now? She had moved on. She was happy with Junho, happier than she had ever been with him. What right did he have to disrupt that? What could he possibly offer her that would make up for 3 years of emotional neglect? Jae-won drove home in a daze. For the first time in his life, he did not have a plan. He did not have a strategy. He only had this terrible, aching regret and a desperate need to somehow make things right. His mother called the next morning, as she did every Sunday. Madame Kang was a formidable woman in her 60s, who had single-handedly raised Jae-won after his father's death when he was 15. She had taught him everything he knew about business, about discipline, about the importance of putting success above all else. She had been both mother and mentor, pushing him to excel in ways that had shaped him into the man he was, for better and worse. She was also the only person in the world who could make him feel like a chastised child with a single look. Jae-won remembered the day his father died with painful clarity. He had been at school, in the middle of a math exam, when the principal came to pull him out of class. The drive to the hospital had felt endless, his mother's hand gripping his so tightly it hurt. And then they had arrived, and the doctors had told them it was too late, and his whole world had collapsed. In the weeks that followed, Madame Kang had transformed from a society wife into a steel-willed businesswoman. She had taken over the company's board meetings, fought off hostile takeover attempts, and somehow kept the business afloat while raising a grieving teenage son. She had been his rock, but she had also been his taskmaster, pushing him to be stronger, better, harder than everyone else. "You are the man of this family now," she had told him at his father's funeral. "Act like it." And he had. He had suppressed his grief, channeled it into ambition, become the cold, focused CEO his mother needed him to be. But somewhere along the way, he had lost the ability to be anything else. He had forgotten how to feel, how to connect, how to love. Until Hana. "I heard Hana was at the charity gala last night." Madame Kang's voice was deceptively casual, with a photographer of all people. Some artist type who takes pictures of models for a living. Jae-won's jaw tightened. "Mother, I am simply making an observation. She has moved on quickly, has she not? One might almost think she was eager to be free of you. Perhaps she never cared for you as much as you thought. Did you call just to torment me? Or was there an actual purpose?" Madame Kang was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its cutting edge. "I called because I am your mother, and I can hear in your voice that something is wrong. You sound like you did when you were 10 years old and lost the science fair to that park boy. You were devastated, but you refused to show it. You just went to your room and did not come out for hours." She paused meaningfully. "You regret the divorce." It was not a question. Jae-won closed his eyes, feeling the walls he had built around his emotions begin to crumble. "I made a mistake, Mother. A terrible mistake. I let the best thing in my life walk away, and now she has found someone else, and I do not know how to fix it. Then fix it. It is not that simple. She has someone else now. She is happy. Happier than she ever was with me. Madame Kang's laugh was sharp and knowing. Jae-won, in 63 years of life, I have learned one thing about love. It is never simple. It is messy and complicated and terrifying. But that does not mean it is not worth fighting for. She sighed, and for a moment, she sounded less like the formidable businesswoman and more like a mother who loved her son. I never interfered in your marriage because I believed you needed to learn your own lessons. Perhaps I should have said something. Perhaps I should have warned you that you were making the same mistake your father made with me, putting work before love. But I thought you would figure it out on your own. She paused. I was wrong. And now here we are. What do you mean, father made the same mistake? Your father was a workaholic too before he died. Madame Kang's voice softened. We nearly divorced. Did you know that? When you were 5 years old, I packed my bags and told him I was leaving. He begged me to stay. He promised to change. And for a while he did. But then he got sick. And then he was gone. And I was left with all these regrets. She cleared her throat. I will say this. Hana was the best thing that ever happened to you. If there is any chance of winning her back, you should take it. Pride is cold comfort on lonely nights. Trust me. I know. After she hung up, Jae-won sat in his empty house and thought about his mother's words. Fix it. As if 3 years of damage could be repaired with a simple apology. As if Hana would even want to hear what he had to say, but he had to try. He could not spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. Even if she rejected him, even if she laughed in his face and told him he was too late, he had to tell her the truth. He had to tell her that he loved her. Jae-won spent a week planning his approach. This was too important to leave to chance. He researched Hana's new job at the design firm, learning about the projects she was working on, the colleagues she interacted with, the clients she was impressing with her talent. He learned that she had coffee every morning at a small cafe in Hongdae called Bean There, that she went to a yoga class on Wednesday evenings at a studio in Yeonnam-dong, that she spent Sundays at a pottery studio in Samcheong-dong, learning to make ceramics. All these details of her life that he should have known when they were married. All these pieces of her that he had never bothered to discover. He also researched Seo Jun-ho, though this brought him no satisfaction. The photographer was exactly as perfect as he appeared. He donated to charities that supported arts education. He mentored young photographers from disadvantaged backgrounds. He had that golden retriever named Biscuit that he posted about constantly on social media, and the comments were full of people praising him for being kind and thoughtful and genuine. Everything Jae-won was not. But Jae-won had one advantage: history. He and Hana had 3 years of shared experiences, however imperfect. He knew her family, her friends, her hopes and fears. He knew the sound of her laugh first thing in the morning and the way she hummed while she cooked. He knew that she was afraid of thunderstorms and that she cried every time she watched the ending of a certain romantic movie. Jun-ho might be the better man, but Jae-won knew her in ways that took years to accumulate. The question was whether any of that mattered to her anymore. He decided to start with flowers. It was pathetically cliched, but he remembered her mentioning white roses, and he needed some gesture to break the ice. He had his assistant order the most expensive bouquet available from the finest florist in Gangnam, and had it delivered to her office with a simple card. I am sorry. Can we talk? Jae-won. He waited all day for a response, checking his phone every few minutes like a lovesick teenager. None came. The next day, he sent another bouquet. This time, the card read, I know I do not deserve your time, but please, just 10 minutes. Still no response. On the third day, instead of flowers, he sent a book. It was a first edition of her favorite novel, a Korean translation of a classic she had mentioned loving when they first met. He had searched for weeks to find it, eventually locating a copy through an antiquarian book dealer in Tokyo and paying an outrageous sum to have it shipped overnight. The card said, "I remember everything you ever told me. I just never showed it. Please let me show it now." That evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Hana. "You are being ridiculous." His heart leaped. It was not forgiveness, but it was contact. He typed back immediately, "I know. Can I explain in person?" A long pause, so long that he thought she had decided not to respond at all. Then, "Coffee. Tomorrow. The cafe on Ulmadang Row. 2 p.m. Do not bring flowers." He barely slept that night. The cafe was small and cozy, tucked between a vintage clothing store and a record shop in the heart of Hongdae's artistic district. It was exactly the kind of place Hana would love, warm and unpretentious, with mismatched furniture, exposed brick walls decorated with local artwork, and the smell of fresh pastries mingling with the rich aroma of brewing coffee. Indie music played softly from hidden speakers, and the afternoon sunlight filtered through large windows, casting golden rectangles on the worn wooden floor. Jaewon arrived 30 minutes early and sat in a corner booth, feeling absurdly nervous. He ordered a black coffee and stared at it without drinking, running through what he wanted to say in his head. He had practiced his speech 100 times, crafted every word to convey his regret and his hope. But now that the moment was approaching, it all seemed inadequate. When Hana walked in at exactly 2 o'clock, his breath caught in his throat. She was wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no designer clothes. She looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. "You look ridiculous sitting there." She slid into the seat across from him, her expression guarded but not hostile, like a schoolboy waiting for his crush. "I feel ridiculous." Jaewon tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "Thank you for coming." "I almost did not." She ordered a latte from the passing waitress, then turned back to him. "What do you want, Jaewon?" "I want to apologize." The words came out in a rush. "For everything. For the way I treated you during our marriage. For taking you for granted. For being so focused on work that I forgot I had a wife who deserved to be loved." Hana's expression did not change. "That is a nice speech." "Did you practice it?" "Yes," Jaewon admitted. "I have been practicing for a week. But that does not make it less true." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her latte even though she had not added anything to it. "Why now?" "We have been divorced for 2 months. Why are you suddenly interested in apologizing?" "Because I saw you at the gala. With him." He forced himself to meet her eyes. "And I realized that I had let the best thing in my life walk away without a fight. I realized that I love you, Hana. I think I have always loved you. I was just too much of a coward to admit it." Hana set down her spoon with a sharp click. "You are unbelievable. For 3 years I waited for you to see me. 3 years of cooking your meals and attending your events and sleeping alone in our bed while you worked until midnight. I gave you every opportunity to be a husband, and you could not be bothered. And now that I have finally moved on, you decide you love me?" "I know." Jaewon's voice was rough. "I know I am too late. I know I do not deserve another chance. But I could not let you move on without at least telling you the truth, without at least trying." "The truth?" Hana laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you saw me with Junho and got jealous. That is not love, Jaewon. That is ego. You could not stand seeing another man have something that used to belong to you. That is not fair. Is it not?" She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Tell me this. If you had not seen me with Junho, would you be here right now? Would you have sent flowers and rare books and dramatic apologies? Or would you still be in your office, congratulating yourself on a clean divorce?" Jae-won opened his mouth to protest, then closed it, because she was right. Seeing her with Jun-ho had been the catalyst. Without that jolt of jealousy, he might have gone on for months, years even, telling himself he was fine without her. "I do not know," he admitted finally. "Maybe not. Maybe I would have been too blind to see what I lost. But does that matter?" The jealousy woke me up. It made me realize what I should have known all along. Is the end result not what counts? Hana stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head, and to his horror, he saw tears forming in her eyes. Do you know the saddest part? A year ago, even 6 months ago, I would have given anything to hear you say those words. I loved you so much, Jae-won. I would have done anything to make our marriage work. And now I have Jun-ho. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He is kind and attentive, and he actually shows up when he says he will. He asks about my day and listens to the answer. He makes me feel valued in ways you never did. Jae-won felt each word like a knife to the chest. But does he make you feel the way I do? He reached across the table and took her hand before she could pull away. Hana, look at me. She looked. And in that moment, he saw it. Beneath the anger and the hurt and the carefully constructed walls, there was still something there. A flicker of the connection they had once shared, buried but not destroyed. I am not asking you to choose me right now, Jae-won said quietly. I am asking you to give me a chance to prove that I have changed. Let me court you properly, the way I should have from the beginning. Let me show you who I can be when I actually try. Hana pulled her hand back. Jae-won, I am with someone. I know. And I am not asking you to betray him. I am just asking you not to close the door on us completely. Not yet. She stood up, gathering her purse. I need to think. Do not contact me again until I am ready. She left the cafe without looking back. Jae-won sat alone in the booth, his coffee untouched and cold, wondering if he had just made things better or infinitely worse. The waiting was agony. Days turned into a week, then 2. Jae-won threw himself into work, but even the thrill of closing deals could not distract him from checking his phone every 5 minutes. Hana had asked for space, and he was determined to respect that, even if it killed him. He started making changes in his life, real changes this time. He hired a second-in-command to handle day-to-day operations, freeing up his evenings and weekends for the first time in years. He began seeing a therapist to work through his issues with emotional intimacy, unpacking the damage his father's death and his mother's demanding expectations had done to his ability to connect with others. He visited his mother more often and actually listened when she talked, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. Madame Kang noticed the difference immediately. You are becoming human, she observed during one of their dinners. It suits you. I should have done this years ago. Yes, she agreed. You should have. But the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. 3 weeks after their meeting at the cafe, Hana finally texted, Meet me at our old apartment. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Jae-won arrived at the Hanam-dong house at exactly 6, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The house that had once been his home now felt foreign, stripped of the warmth Hana had brought to it. He had not been able to bring himself to redecorate, leaving the blank spaces on the walls and the empty surfaces where her touches had once been. She was waiting in the living room, standing by the window where they had once stood together watching the Seoul skyline. She looked tired, he noticed, with shadows under her eyes that had not been there before. Thank you for coming, she said without turning around. Thank you for inviting me. He stayed near the door, afraid that moving closer might spook her. How have you been? Confused. She finally turned to face him. I ended things with Jun-ho. Jae-won felt a surge of hope that he quickly suppressed. Why? Because of you. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because ever since our conversation at the cafe, I have not been able to stop thinking about you, about us, about what might have been if you had said those things 3 years ago. Hana, I was happy with Junho. She cut him off. He is a good man. He would have made me happy for the rest of my life. But when I was with him, I kept thinking about you. Kept wondering if you really meant what you said. Kept waiting for my phone to buzz even though I told you not to contact me. She took a shaky breath. That is not fair to him. He deserves someone who is fully present, not someone whose heart is stuck in the past. So what does this mean? Jaewon asked carefully. For us? I do not know. Hana's eyes met his, vulnerable in a way he had rarely seen. I want to believe you have changed. I want to believe that we could have a second chance. But I am terrified of getting hurt again. I gave you everything I had, Jaewon, and you barely noticed. How do I trust that this time will be different? Jaewon crossed the room and took her hands in his. He felt her tremble at his touch, and something in his chest broke open. You cannot, he said honestly. You cannot know for sure. All I can do is show you day by day that I am not the same man who let you walk away. I will mess up. I will fall back into old patterns. But I promise you, I will never stop trying. I will never take you for granted again. Hana searched his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. We take it slow. No moving back in together. No grand gestures. Just dates. Real dates, like normal people. We start from the beginning, as if we are meeting for the first time. I can do that. Jaewon felt hope blooming in his chest for the first time in months. And if you hurt me again, I walk away and never look back. No second chances after this one. I mean it, Jaewon. This is your last chance to prove that you can be the man I need you to be. Understood. I will not waste it. She smiled then, the first real smile he had seen from her since before the divorce. It lit up her whole face, reminding him of the woman he had married, the woman he had nearly destroyed with his neglect. Okay, so, when is our first date? Jaewon smiled back, feeling lighter than he had in months. How about right now? There is a new Italian place in Cheongdam that I have been wanting to try. My assistant says the pasta is incredible, and they have a wine list that would make a sommelier weep with joy. Hana laughed, and the sound was like music. It was the sound he had missed without realizing it, the sound that had been absent from his house for 2 long months. Lead the way, Jaewon Kang. Show me the man you are trying to become. Their courtship the second time around was nothing like the first. Back then, they had been 2 strangers going through the motions of an arranged match, checking boxes and meeting expectations. Now, they were 2 people choosing each other deliberately, learning each other anew. Their first official date was at the Italian restaurant in Cheongdam that Jaewon had mentioned. He had reserved the best table, the one in the corner with the candlelight and the view of the garden. Hana arrived in a simple black dress that took his breath away. You look beautiful, he said, standing to pull out her chair. Hana raised an eyebrow. The old Jaewon would never have said that. The old Jaewon was an idiot. He sat across from her, suddenly nervous. I meant what I said at the cafe. I want to do this properly. Court you. Win you back. Win me back. Hana considered the words. That implies I am a prize to be won. That is not what I meant. I know. She smiled softly. I am just giving you a hard time. Old habits. The dinner was awkward at first, both of them unsure how to navigate this new terrain. They had been husband and wife, then strangers, and now something in between. But as the wine flowed and the food arrived, something shifted. They began to talk, really talk, in ways they never had during their marriage. Tell me something I do not know about you, Hana challenged. Jaewon thought for a moment. I am terrified of heights. What? Hana nearly choked on her wine. But your office is on the 42nd floor. I know. I spent the first 6 months avoiding the windows. Eventually I got used to it, but I still do not like it. He shrugged. I never told anyone because it seemed like a weakness. Hana stared at him. What else do you not tell anyone? That opened a floodgate. Over the next few weeks, Jae-won revealed more of himself than he had in 3 years of marriage. He told her about the recurring nightmare where he was giving a presentation and suddenly forgot how to speak. He confessed that he hated the taste of whiskey but drank it because it was expected of men in his position. He admitted that he had cried when his childhood dog died and that the memory still made him sad. In turn, Hana shared her own secrets. She told him about the novel she had been writing for years, a story about a woman who discovers magic in everyday moments. She confessed that she sometimes felt like a fraud at her design job, convinced that everyone would discover she was not as talented as they thought. She admitted that she had been seeing a therapist too, working through her own issues of self-worth and the damage their first marriage had done. These conversations happened everywhere, in restaurants and cafes, on long walks through Bukhansan, where the autumn leaves created a canopy of gold and red, in the kitchen of Jae-won's house, where they learned to cook together, making mess after glorious mess. One evening, after a particularly disastrous attempt at making dumplings, Hana looked around at the flower-covered kitchen and started laughing. Jae-won joined in, and soon they were both doubled over, tears streaming down their faces. "We are terrible at this," Hana gasped. "We are." Jae-won wiped his eyes. "But I have never had more fun." Hana's expression softened. "Neither have I. That was the night of their first kiss, since the divorce. It happened naturally, both of them leaning in at the same moment, their lips meeting with a tenderness that made Jae-won's heart ache. When they pulled apart, Hana's eyes were shining. "I have missed you," she whispered. "I have missed you too. More than I knew was possible." They dated for 3 months before Hana agreed to move back in. Even then, she was cautious, keeping some of her things at her Hongdae apartment just in case. Jae-won understood. He had broken her trust once. Rebuilding it would take time. The day she finally gave up the apartment, she brought the last box of her belongings to the Hanam-dong house and set it down in the foyer. Jae-won watched her, his heart full. "That is the last of it," Hana said. "I am officially home." Jae-won crossed the room and took her in his arms. "Welcome home." They christened every room of the house that night, reclaiming the space that had once been so cold and empty. When they finally collapsed in bed, exhausted and happy, Hana traced patterns on his chest. "I was so scared," she admitted. "When I left Junho, when I decided to give you another chance, I kept thinking, what if it is the same? What if nothing has really changed?" Jae-won pulled her closer. "I understand. I had the same fears. What if I fall back into old patterns? What if I disappoint you again? But then I realized something." "What?" "Fear is not a reason to stop. Fear is a sign that something matters, and you matter to me more than anything else in the world. So I will keep trying, keep working, keep showing up. Every single day." Hana kissed him. "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said. I have been taking notes from those Korean dramas you like." She laughed. "I knew you were secretly watching them, only the ones with happy endings." Their relationship deepened in ways neither had expected. Jae-won became a regular presence at Hana's design firm, attending her presentations and offering feedback that was surprisingly insightful. Hana started accompanying him to business events, no longer as an obligation, but as a genuine partner. Madame Kang noticed the change immediately. "You are different," she told her son during one of their Sunday dinners. "Happier." "I am." Jae-won glanced at Hana, who was helping the housekeeper in the kitchen. "She makes me want to be better." "Good." Madame Kang nodded approvingly. Hold on to that. Hold on to her. I intend to. The proposal came 6 months after their reconciliation. On the anniversary of the day, Hana had packed her boxes to leave. Jae-won had planned everything meticulously, hiring a string quartet, arranging for roses to cover every surface of the living room, preparing a speech that he had practiced 100 times. But when the moment came, all his careful planning flew out the window. He dropped to one knee in front of her, pulled out the ring, and simply said, "I love you. I never want to lose you again. Will you marry me?" Hana was crying too hard to speak. She just nodded, over and over, until Jae-won slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into his arms. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes." 3 months into their renewed relationship, Hana moved back into the Hanam-dong house. This time, there were no separate bedrooms. This time, when Jae-won came home from work, he found her in the living room, surrounded by fabric swatches and design sketches for her new sustainable fashion line. This time, he sat down beside her and asked about her day, and actually listened to the answer. "I am proud of you," Hana told him one evening, her head resting on his chest as they watched the sun set over the Han River. "You have become the man I always knew you could be. I had good motivation." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I had something worth fighting for." Madame Kang approved of the reconciliation, though she expressed it in her usual backhanded way. "I suppose you are not completely hopeless after all," she told Jae-won at a family dinner. "Hana has always been too good for you, but at least now you seem to realize it." "Thank you, Mother. I think." Hana laughed and squeezed his hand under the table. She had won Madame Kang over years ago with her patience and grace. Now, with the relationship on more solid ground, the two women had developed a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and a shared exasperation, with Jae-won's occasional emotional density. 1 year after their divorce, Jae-won proposed again. Not with a business arrangement or a practical calculation, but with a heartfelt speech and a ring he had designed himself, incorporating elements that were meaningful to their story. The white gold band for the roses he should have bought her years ago, the sapphire stone the color of the dress she had worn when he finally realized he loved her, the delicate engravings of cherry blossoms for the spring walks they had taken during their courtship. "This time I want to do it right," he said, down on one knee in the living room where she had once packed boxes to leave him. "I want to marry you not because our families expect it, but because I cannot imagine my life without you. Will you give me the honor of being your husband? For real this time?" Hana was crying, but she was smiling too. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Their second wedding was small and intimate, held at a traditional hanok in Jeonju. The autumn leaves were at their peak, painting the courtyard in shades of red and gold. Only close friends and family attended, maybe 40 people in total, a stark contrast to the elaborate affair their first wedding had been. Hana wore a simple white dress that she had designed herself, the first piece from what would become her sustainable fashion line. No heavy beading, no elaborate train, just clean lines and beautiful fabric that moved like water when she walked. Jae-won could not stop staring at her, wondering how he had ever been foolish enough to let her go. The ceremony was traditional, but personal. They had written their own vows, something that would have been unthinkable at their first wedding. Hana went first, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Jae-won," she said, "3 years ago, I married you because our families wanted us to. I did not know you. I did not know what our life would become. But I had hope. I had so much hope that we could build something beautiful together." She paused, collecting herself. That hope faded, and then it died. And then, when I had finally given up, you showed me that hope is never truly gone. It just waits for us to find it again. I promise to keep finding hope with you, even when things are hard. I promise to fight for us, the way you fought for me. Jae-won had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. His voice was rough with emotion when he finally managed to form words. "Hana," he began. "I have spent my whole life believing that success meant being strong, invulnerable, in control. I thought that needing someone was a weakness, that depending on anyone else would make me less." He shook his head. "I was wrong. The strongest thing I have ever done was admit that I needed you, that I loved you, that my life without you was not worth living. I promised to never hide from you again. I promised to let you see me, all of me, even the parts I am ashamed of. I promised to be worthy of your hope." When the officiant pronounced them married, Jae-won kissed her with all the passion he had held back during their first marriage. Their guests cheered and threw flower petals, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The reception was held in the Hanok's main hall, with traditional Korean food and music that blended folk melodies with modern arrangements. Madame Kang gave a toast that was, by her standards, almost sentimental. "I have watched my son make many decisions over the years," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Some were brilliant, others were catastrophic. Letting Hana go was the most catastrophic of all, but winning her back that showed wisdom I was not sure he possessed." She raised her glass. "To the happy couple. May they continue to choose each other, every day, for the rest of their lives." Hana's parents were there too, her father beaming with pride, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. They had been disappointed when the first marriage failed, but they had never blamed Hana. Now, seeing their daughter truly happy for the first time, they could not contain their joy. Minji, Hana's best friend who had threatened Jae-won at the first wedding, pulled him aside during the reception. "I still do not like you," she said bluntly. "But I have to admit, you have impressed me." She poked him in the chest. "Do not screw it up. I will not." Jae-won met her eyes steadily. "I promise." Minji studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Welcome to the family, for real this time." The newlyweds spent their honeymoon in Jeju, at a small resort on the southern coast. It was nothing like their first honeymoon in Paris, where Jae-won had spent half the time on conference calls. This time, he left his phone in the room and focused entirely on Hana. They explored the island together, hiking up Halasan, swimming in the crystal-clear waters, eating fresh seafood at a tiny restaurant that Hana had read about in a travel blog. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, filling in the gaps of their knowledge about each other. "What was your childhood like?" Hana asked one evening, as they watched the sunset from their hotel balcony. Jae-won was quiet for a long moment. "My father was everything to me," he finally said. "He taught me to ride a bike. He helped me with my homework. He told me stories about the company, about his dreams for its future." He paused. "When he died, I felt like I had to become him. Like all his unfinished work was now my responsibility. I was 15 years old, and suddenly I was the man of the house." Hana took his hand. "That is a lot for a teenager to carry. My mother pushed me hard. She said it was what he would have wanted. Maybe it was, but somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything other than a CEO. I forgot how to be a person." He looked at her. "You are helping me remember." When they returned to Seoul, Jae-won threw himself into being a better husband with the same intensity he had once devoted to business. He came home at a reasonable hour. He planned date nights and remembered anniversaries. He learned to cook Hana's favorite dishes, burning several pots in the process, but eventually producing a passable kimchi jjigae. He also continued his therapy, working through issues he had buried for decades. The therapist helped him understand that his fear of intimacy stemmed from the trauma of losing his father, from the pressure his mother had placed on him to be perfect, from a lifetime of equating vulnerability with weakness. "It is not easy," he told Hana one night, after a particularly difficult session. "Digging up all this old pain. Sometimes I wonder if it is worth it." "It is worth it," she assured him. You are worth it. We are worth it. 6 months after their second wedding, Hana discovered she was pregnant. She told Jaewon over dinner, sliding an ultrasound photo across the table with a nervous smile. "What is this?" Jaewon picked up the photo, squinting at the grainy image. "It looks like a blob." Hana laughed. "It is our blob. Due in 7 months." The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. His eyes went wide. "You are pregnant?" "We are pregnant." Hana took his hand. "Are you happy?" Happy did not begin to describe it. Jaewon felt tears welling up, something that would have been unthinkable for the man he used to be. He pulled Hana into his arms and held her tight, unable to speak. "I take that as a yes," she murmured against his chest. The pregnancy was not easy. Hana suffered from severe morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. Jaewon learned to hold her hair back while she was sick, to rub her feet when they swelled, to run out at midnight for whatever food she was craving. "You do not have to do all this," she told him one night, as he massaged her aching back. "You have a company to run. The company can run itself for a while." He kissed her forehead. "You are more important." When the twins arrived, 6 weeks early and requiring a stay in the NICU, Jaewon experienced fear like he had never known. He sat beside their tiny incubators for hours, watching their fragile chests rise and fall, praying to gods he was not sure he believed in. "They are fighters," the doctor assured him. "They get it from their parents." The babies came home after 3 weeks, healthy and hungry. Jaewon had never changed a diaper in his life, but he learned quickly, fumbling through midnight feedings and soothing cries that seemed to have no cause and no solution. "You are good at this," Hana observed one morning, watching him rock their daughter back to sleep. "I am terrified," he admitted. "What if I mess them up the way my mother messed me up?" "You will not." Hana smiled. "Because you are aware of it. Because you are trying. That is more than most parents can say." The years that followed were not perfect. No marriages. Jaewon sometimes fell back into workaholic patterns, and Hana had to remind him that deadlines could wait, but life could not. Hana sometimes struggled with insecurity, needing reassurance that he was not going to wake up one day and revert to the cold stranger she had first married. They fought about money and in-laws and whose turn it was to do the dishes, but they also laughed together, loved together, grew together. They welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, who had Jaewon's determination and Hana's warmth. They built a house in Pangyo with a big garden where the kids could play and a studio where Hana could work on her designs. They established a foundation supporting young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. Jaewon sometimes thought about the man he had been before, the cold CEO who had nearly thrown away the love of his life without a second thought. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. He could not imagine returning to those empty nights in the big house, those meaningless conquests in the boardroom, that constant striving for a success that never felt like enough. Happiness, he discovered, was not about achievements or accolades. It was about coming home to someone who loved you. It was about watching your children grow and knowing you were giving them the childhood you never had. It was about holding your wife's hand and feeling grateful for every moment together. On their 10th anniversary, Hana found him standing at the window of their bedroom, watching the sunset. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how close I came to losing all of this." He turned to face her, pulling her into his arms. "About how stupid I was, and how lucky I am that you gave me another chance." Hana smiled up at him. "You know, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you had never gotten jealous. If you had just let me go. I try not to think about that." Jaewon shuddered. "It is too terrible to contemplate." She laughed and kissed him softly. "I am glad you came after me, even if your methods were a bit stalkerish at first. I prefer to think of it as dedicated persistence. Keep telling yourself that. They stood together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the house, their children were arguing about whose turn it was to choose the movie. The dog was barking at something in the garden. Life was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely wonderful. "You know what I have learned?" Jae-won said. "Sometimes you do not realize what you have until you see it in someone else's arms. I needed that wake-up call. I needed to see you with Junho to understand what I was about to lose." Hana nodded. "And I needed to know that you wanted me, not just the idea of me. Seeing you fight for us, seeing you actually try, that meant more than any words could." Later that night, Jae-won lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought them here. The arranged marriage, the cold years, the divorce, the jealousy, the reconciliation, the second wedding, the family they had built together. It had not been an easy path, but it had been their path, and he would not trade a single moment of it. Hana stirred beside him, her voice sleepy. "Still awake? Just counting my blessings." He pulled her closer. "Go back to sleep." She mumbled something unintelligible and burrowed into his side. Within moments, her breathing had evened out, deep and peaceful. Jae-won watched her sleep, this woman who had given him more second chances than he deserved, and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. Sometimes the best love stories are not about finding the perfect person. They are about realizing that the perfect person was beside you all along, and fighting like hell to keep them there. Jae-won finally closed his eyes, a smile on his lips, Hana warm in his arms, and the future stretching out before them like a promise. And that, perhaps, is the greatest love story of all. Years later, when people asked Jae-won how he had changed from a cold workaholic into a devoted family man, he would tell them about the night he saw his ex-wife at a charity gala with another man. He would tell them about the jealousy that had consumed him, the regret that had nearly destroyed him, and the second chance he had been lucky enough to receive. "It took losing her to understand what I had," he would say. "It took seeing her happy with someone else to realize that I wanted to be the one making her happy." The story became something of a legend in their social circle. The cold CEO brought to his knees by love. The divorced couple who found their way back to each other. It was the kind of story that made people believe in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that even the most broken relationships could be healed. Hana had her own version of the story, one she would share with close friends over glasses of wine. "My husband was an idiot," she would say with a laugh. "A lovable idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. It took him 3 years to realize what he had, and another year to convince me to take him back. But you know what? I am glad it happened that way. If we had stayed in that first marriage, we would have been miserable forever. We needed to fall apart so we could put ourselves back together the right way." The foundation they established together became one of the most successful charitable organizations in Korea. It supported young artists from underprivileged backgrounds, giving them scholarships and mentorship opportunities that could change their lives. Every year they hosted a gala where the recipients showcased their work, and every year, Jae-won and Hana were there, holding hands and beaming with pride. Seo Junho, the photographer who had briefly captured Hana's heart, eventually became a friend of the family. It had taken years and some awkward encounters, but they had all moved past the complicated history. Junho had found his own happiness with a fellow artist, a sculptor whose work complemented his perfectly. Their wedding was featured in all the major magazines, and Jae-won had sent a generous gift with a card that simply said, "Thank you. Thank you for making my wife happy when I could not. Thank you for being a good man. And thank you for stepping aside when she made her choice." Junho had understood. He had known from the beginning that Hana's heart was never fully his, that there was always a part of her still connected to her ex-husband. When she had ended things, he had been hurt, but not surprised. And now, seeing them together, seeing the family they had built, he could only feel gratitude that he had been part of their story, even if only as a catalyst for change. The twins grew up surrounded by love. Minseo, the boy, had his father's intensity and his mother's creativity. He talked about wanting to be an architect, designing buildings that would change the Seoul skyline. Ji-yoon, the girl, had her mother's warmth and her father's determination. She wanted to be a doctor, to help people, to make a difference in the world. Jae-won watched them grow with a mixture of pride and terror. He remembered his own childhood, the pressure and expectations, the feeling that love was conditional on achievement. He was determined to give his children something different. "I love you," he told them every day. "Not because of what you do, not because of what you achieve, just because you are you." Hana caught him saying it once and smiled. "You have come a long way," she said. "I had a good teacher." On the 20th anniversary of their first wedding, which also happened to be the 15th anniversary of their second wedding, the family gathered at the Hanam-dong house where everything had begun. The house had changed over the years, filled now with children's drawings and family photographs and all the messy evidence of a life well lived. But the window where Hana had once packed boxes to leave was still there, and sometimes Jae-won stood in front of it and remembered how close he had come to losing everything. Madame Kang was there, older now, but no less formidable. She had softened over the years, especially with the grandchildren, who called her Halmoni and could wrap her around their little fingers. She had never apologized for the pressure she had put on Jae-won growing up, but she had changed too, in her own way. "I was hard on you," she admitted once, when they were alone. "Maybe too hard. I thought I was preparing you for the world. I did not realize I was teaching you to hide from it. It is okay, Mother." Jae-won had forgiven her long ago. You did the best you could. And in the end, things worked out. Yes. Madame Kang looked at Hana, who was laughing with the children in the garden. They did. The party lasted late into the night. Old friends came by to offer congratulations. The twins performed a song they had practiced for weeks, Minseo on guitar and Ji-yoon singing. Hana cried. Jae-won pretended he was not crying too. After everyone had left and the children were in bed, Jae-won and Hana stood at the window together, looking out at the Seoul skyline. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" Hana asked. "Our wedding night." Jae-won nodded. "I was terrified. Of me? Of everything. Of being married. Of being responsible for someone else's happiness. Of failing." He pulled her closer. "I did fail, for a while, but you gave me a chance to try again." Hana rested her head on his shoulder. "I almost did not. When you first came to me with your apologies and your flowers, I wanted to slam the door in your face. I was so angry, Jae-won, so hurt." "What changed your mind?" "Jun-ho, actually." Hana smiled at the irony. He could tell my heart was not in it. He said, "Hana, if there is any chance that you still love him, you should find out. Life is too short to wonder what if." She looked up at Jae-won. "So I did, and here we are. Here we are." Jae-won kissed her forehead. "And I thank God every day that you gave me that chance." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. 20 years of marriage, 15 of them truly happy. A business empire that now seemed far less important than the family he had built. 2 children who would carry their legacy forward. A love that had been tested and had emerged stronger. "What do you want?" Hana asked. "For the next 20 years?" Jae-won thought about it. "More of this," he said finally. "More quiet evenings, more family dinners, more watching our children grow, more falling in love with you every day." Hana laughed. "That is very romantic for a former cold CEO. I have had good teachers." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, the way she had kissed him thousands of times before. But somehow, it still felt new. It still felt like the first time. I love you, Jaewon Kong. I love you too, Hana. More than I ever knew was possible. They went to bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had every night for 15 years. Outside, Seoul hummed with life, a city that never slept, full of people chasing dreams and making mistakes, and hopefully, like Jaewon, getting second chances to make things right. And Jaewon, finally at peace, finally understanding what really mattered, slept better than he had in years. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows and the twins argued over breakfast and Hana hummed while she made coffee, Jaewon looked around at the chaos of his life and smiled. This, he thought. This is what I almost threw away. This is what jealousy helped me find. This is what love looks like. Not in the grand gestures, but in the ordinary moments. He caught Hana's eye across the kitchen, and she smiled back at him, and in that smile was everything. Everything he had almost lost. Everything he had fought to regain. Everything that made life worth living. He picked up his phone and texted Hana, "Good morning, beautiful. I love you." Her response came immediately. "Good morning yourself. I love you too. Now come have breakfast before the kids eat everything." Jaewon smiled, pocketed his phone, and joined his family at the table. The twins were arguing about whose turn it was to sit in the good chair. Hana was pouring coffee, her hair still mussed from sleep. The dog was begging for scraps under the table. It was chaos, pure and simple, and it was perfect. And that, truly and forever, is the greatest love story of all. The end.